Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Minnesota Rack Stars podcast. Sorry we've been away for a while, but we ran into a few hiccups between this podcast and the last podcast. As many of you know, that I had back surgery here this past fall and kind of threw a wrench into things. I'm also the head boys basketball coach, which takes up a lot of my time as well. But we're back today, and we got a unique opportunity to be visiting with John Hlebaen, and he runs Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy, and he's going to share some pretty cool taxidermy stories, but also with that, he's going to inform you on how the classes run if you're interested in maybe becoming a taxidermist yourself. It's some good information that he has for you guys. I hope you enjoy the podcast. We're glad to be back. We enjoyed doing this, and I hope you guys enjoy the show. Hey, before we get started here, if you haven't already heard, we have started up our own apparel store online. So if you're looking to get some sweet Minnesota Rack Star apparel, some swag, you can check it out. It's on our Facebook page. We have the link on there. Also on our website, you can go and check that out. We have anything from hats, mugs, sweatpants, sweatshirts, t-shirts, you name it. It's pretty sweet. So hope you guys check it out, and let's get going with the podcast. Hey, welcome everybody. This week here we are speaking with John Hlebaen from Trails and Taxidermy here out of Rice, Minnesota. John, how are we doing today?
Not too bad.
That's good. So before we really get started talking about School of Taxidermy here, there's a story I want to hear that you might have ran into a little issue with one of your students with a raccoon at one point. Kind of got a little frustrated with the way things were going.
There was one guy, if I remember him correctly. I think you know who he is. I won't mention his name, but he was back in the classroom, and everybody's doing their thing, and it was real quiet. And all of a sudden, it sounded like a wet rag hit the wall, and he was having a little issues with his skin, and he cut quite a few holes in it, and he got a little upset, and he was going to said if he had a gun on him right now, there'd be a lot more holes in that skin. And the story was that I think he took it home and he threw it in the attic, and I think it's still there to this day.
So the individual we're talking about is my Uncle Jerome. He came to the school here and was working on a raccoon or whatever, his first time doing this stuff, and I got a little frustrated with the way things were going, and so this raccoon that we're talking about ended up in the hands of my sister for some reason, and they ended up tricking me with this raccoon. Nice. In some way, shape, or form. I don't remember exactly, but then I got my hands on it, and I brought it over to my cousin's place who lives on a dairy farm, and I went in the calf barn, and I tipped over the bag of milk replacer, and I stuck that raccoon about halfway in there, so all I was sticking out was like its back legs and the tail. And he come walking in, and he was pretty surprised, and I think he went and got a pitchfork or a gun or something, and then all of a sudden, right at the last second, he finally realized that he was a stuffed animal, but he was ready to stick a fork in it.
I never heard that part of the story. I'm going to have to bring that up to Jerome next time I see him.
Yeah, no, it was pretty good. But, so it was a lot of fun. But why don't you tell us what you got going on here, and kind of just give us an overview of what to expect throughout the podcast here, what we're going to be talking about.
Well, 45 years ago, I took a class in high school, or thereabouts. It was 1980, and that's what started my career, and I've been doing it ever since, and full-time taxidermist. And then about 20 years ago, we had a lot of interest. A lot of people were talking to me about teaching them. So I started teaching one-on-one, two-on-one, and then I realized there was a demand for it, so I opened Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy, and it's been going ever since. And there's been a lot of demand for especially after COVID. A lot of guys went out hunting and fishing, stayed active in the woods, and all of a sudden the taxidermists got a year, 2, 3 years out right now. I know some of them are 3 years out on deer heads. It's getting a little bit better, but because of the demand was there, a lot of students decided, so why wait for their specimens at a taxidermist when they can put it together themselves? So a lot of guys are taking the class because of that reason. And again, because of, it's really unique, and a lot of people enjoy mounts on the wall. So,
how many students would you say you've ran through the school here so far?
I would say since its inception 20 years ago, it's got to be close to 150, 200.
Okay. And then you did mention that you've had some people from out of the country.
Yep, we've had the furthest one. Well, the only out-of-country guy we had was guy's name was Hlebaen, and he was from Sweden, and he came just to learn how to do fish, and he was here for 2 weeks, and that was a blast having him here. We've had students from Florida. We've had them from just about every state in the union. Obviously, Midwest is a big draw, but yeah, they come from all over the place.
So what would you say is like one of the maybe biggest qualifications or skills that a person needs to be an efficient and good taxidermist?
Basically, it starts with fleshing of the animals, and if you don't flesh it right, you're going to lose it at the tannery. So you got to make sure you get them skins clean. It's like a buddy of mine said, it's like the foundation of a house. You don't have a good foundation, the rest of the house is going to fall apart on you. Mm-hmm. So you got to make sure that it starts there, which we teach all that. And then, of course, there's a process to the whole thing. But it starts with knowing how to flesh your animals fresh and take care of them in the field, too, as well.
So you kind of mentioned a little bit about your past. What kind of got you going and excited about taxidermy? I know you're an avid outdoorsman. What type of hunting, fishing you do, and what kind of led you into doing this?
It was, to tell you the truth, I think about it to this day. I was just talking with my instructor about it the other day. A couple of years back, or quite a few years ago, I lived in the cities, believe it or not, and I was with the Bell Museum of Natural History is out of the St. Paul, I believe it is, or the university, and they had all these mounts down there, and I kept going down there, and I just kind of got enthralled by it, and that's at that point is when I went to school. That was back in '96, I believe it was, and 86. And that's what kind of got me going. But it was an easy credit in high school. That's really what got me interested in it. And then seeing what I learned in high school could be transferred into making all these mounts and dioramas that the Bell Museum had on display. And then once I got into going through the classes, which were out of Sauk Rapids, it was Bill Johnson's School of Taxidermy. I'll never forget that. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think it was 86 or 87. And then I just proceeded to go from there.
What are some of the things that you've seen throughout the years that has changed the most in taxidermy? Wow.
There's so many things, and it's still evolving. There's still new products coming on the market that are like, wow, why didn't we think of that 20 years ago? When I first got into it, we had to wrap our own bird bodies, use the original heads. Now that's all artificial heads and everything. And everything that's out there just makes our job easier, makes the mouse look a lot better. If you looked at the progression of taxidermy, look at stuff that was mounted in the 50s and the 60s and even 70s and 80s compared to what you got out there now. It really has truly turned into an art form, and it's really come a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that there's a lot of things I've learned throughout the years. With taxidermy, I have no clue what but just different things like when you're ordering, the molds for the deer and stuff, and you live in certain parts of the state, you order molds from, like a mold for that a deer is from the Midwest or the southern parts of the state.
Yep. Or each part of the continent is species specific. You've got like your Florida whitetails are completely different than your Midwest whitetails, and your Alberta whitetails are completely different than your Minnesota whitetails, and like. Just in the state of Minnesota alone, like on smallmouth, there's 4 different kinds of smallmouth, 4 different colors of smallmouth variations. If you've ever been into the boundary waters, you caught a walleye up there, you'll notice that the bellies are completely yellow and they're real dark fish. You go down to southern Minnesota where the sun has a lot of contact on the water. They're light colored. They're really light colored. So there's a lot of variations, and we try and teach a lot of that in the classes.
So what is one of the most, I don't know, maybe exotic animals that you've seen come through here so far?
I do a lot of African stuff. I've actually been to Africa, and I'm going back again because it's so much fun over there. Mm-hmm. So that you get a lot of weird stuff coming from over there. And there's just probably we've got a hippo to do right now. And that's pretty extreme. 12-foot Nile crocodile. That's unique. You don't see a lot of them in Minnesota. Of course, the Plains game and all that. Probably. Weirdest thing I ever had to do was a feeder pig, and that came off of, it was from, we had to do the butt was on one side of the wall and the head was on the other side of the wall. Of course, they don't make feeder pig form, so we just used the javelina form, and it turned out, and the client was happy with it.
Sure. So a student comes in here. What can they expect when they show up to class here with you?
First thing we usually do is, the way the classes are set up, is the first night is just a BS session. We go over the industry a little bit, and pricing and tools, and how the class plays out. The second 2 nights are cape preparation on your whitetails. You're fleshing your whitetail deer. Then we move into fish right away, and there's 3 weekends that are allocated to fish. The classes are basically set up on Fridays, Saturdays, and a few Sundays, so it's a weekend deal. So it really helps people, during the 40-hour work week to be able to make it on the weekends. After the fish, then we move into birds, and there's a 4-day stretch of birds, because birds are tough. You got to really spend a lot of time on birds, and rather than breaking up into 2 weekends, we do a Thursday through Sunday, and then after that, then we start getting the capes back from the tannery, which is right here in town, and then we start prepping the deer capes at that point, measuring them, and then we do the raccoons. That's the next step. Those are already tanned. That's what they're working on today, and then the deer capes are mounted, and then the last day is finish work, where you do all the final prep and the finish work on everything.
Sure. Now you mentioned price, and I think this is one of the biggest things people think about before bringing their trophy to a taxidermy is price, and obviously price has gone up since COVID. Now on your end, obviously other things have gone up in pricing. So what are some of those things where people can understand why your guys' prices need to go up?
Yep, exactly. There's everything like since COVID, just constantly. When I first got into this business, it was a deer head would cost me literally $50 to put together, and that was on the high end. Right now, a deer head costs me damn near $300. It's
sure.
There's labor prices in there and stuff, but it's everything's, like I said, everything's gone up. Deer heads right now, a lot of guys are getting $1,000 a deer head. I'm getting $30 an inch on a fish. A lot of this has to do with the supply and demand of the numbers of mounts you can take in. You can only do so much work in a year, and the only way to control that is to raise your prices. And once COVID hit, like I said, everybody was out hunting and fishing, so taxidermists got inundated with all this work. And in the meantime, the labor force went to hell, so the tanneries didn't have the labor to tan the capes. So that, in turn, got them behind, so that got us way behind. So the only way to control that is to raise your prices. And so that's where the pricing comes into play. And at $1,000 a deer head, $1,000 a fish, if you're gonna put 7 pieces on the wall in your lifetime, your class tuition is paid for right there.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about it that way. So maybe give some advice for people out there who are maybe thinking about getting into taxidermy. As far as like maybe things people don't think about. And I don't know, maybe this doesn't happen at all, but does the DNR contact you all if they're ever investigating something? Have they ever contacted you to maybe find out more information?
The DNR you got to go back a few years on this one, but back in the day, before computers, before the internet, before eBay and all these places where you could actually buy skins on the market, the DNR was supposed to come in and check you every year. And for whatever reason, to make sure all your stuff is squared away, make sure you're not trying to do any shady stuff under the table. And they really concentrated on a lot of the guys, I think, in their houses, and the guys doing it out of the basement or out of the garage. My place is a storefront, so you can walk in here at any time and check my stuff out. And I wasn't really looked at that heavily, but then last year, everybody got inspected.
Sure.
And like literally every taxidermist, even the new guys just firing up their class or their shop got inspected, and which is great if they're going to do that every year. That make sure everything's on. Now nobody's doing anything illegal, which everybody's usually pretty squared away on that. Because that, for one thing, you got to make sure you bring your hunting or fishing licenses in to the taxidermist. Most people are pretty good about that, because if you don't bring your license in, the guy's got 10-pound walleyes in their freezer. Now they're on his license. And game warden comes in and sees that, he could confiscate those fish. That's one thing that with the DNR's rules and regulations that they do. So
yeah. Any interesting stories that you have as far as maybe what's maybe like you said there was a hog or whatever. Most interesting story. Let's go with an animal that's been taken. Maybe a deer came in or a fish that was caught or whatever. Just a wild story that you've heard from somebody that that you associate with.
That's another thing that I try and bring up to these students. If you're going to be in this long term like I've been,
Yep.
you should start a book, because every hunter comes in here has a story, and you hear every one of them. And over all these years, it's like, God, I should have written some of these down, and I could have made a book on all this stuff.
Yeah.
Probably one of the funniest ones. Guy in Avon, Gabe Morton gets the guy out of his tree, and he's all layered up because it's cold that morning. I'm sure there's better stories out there than this, but I can remember thinking this one every once in a while. And deer busts out of the woods, and Gabe Morton's got the guy's gun, and because he's digging for his license.
Yep.
And deer busts out of the woods, and the guy looked at the Gabe Morton. Gabe Morton looked at the guy, and he ain't seen the license yet. And he said, "It's your call." Gabe Morton says, "It's your call." So the hunter grabbed the gun, starts shooting at the deer. And the game warden told him, he was behind him, he was watching where the bullets were hitting, and the guy puts the deer down, and he looked over at the guy and said, "No, you better have your license." And he did, but he kind of aided and abetted at that point. So
yeah, I bet you get to meet a lot of different people, like you said, a lot of different stories. That's probably the toughest thing in your line of work here is having people come in. You want to build relationships with people, but yet at the same time, you got to get work done too. And probably the toughest part is to kind of balance that out and just being a people person too on top of it.
Yep. Yeah. Once you get to talking, well, work's not getting done.
Yep.
And there's a lot of that, but it's always fun hearing everybody's stories and guessing with people.
So if a person's starting up a taxidermist business and wants to come to school here and stuff, what would you recommend for starting out for the amount of heads you should take in or amount of fish you should take in? Because you hear some people kind of getting taken in too many, and then all of a sudden they're too far behind, and people are kind of upset that they're not getting their mounts back.
A good case in point, there was a guy a couple of years ago that came through here, took the class, and he promoted himself really, really well. And he got inundated to the point where he hit the first level of burnout, and he had to cut way back. And most people don't realize how much work is out there. And if you get your name out there, you can get literally swamped within the first year. It's that kind of an industry.
I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I think this is an important topic that, people, should think about if they want to get into taxidermy and whatnot. It's lifted now, but it could come back on. You just never know. But, with the transportation or transporting animals from state to state and whatnot, it's opened back up now that people can transport it. How did that have an impact on your business when they weren't allowing you to bring animals across state lines?
It affected everybody, and you got to go back probably 20 years on this one, but they tried this once, or they did this once before, and the Minnesota Taxidermy Guild, which I'm a life member of that. I always say I'm a life member of two things: life and the Minnesota Taxidermy Guild, and I've been with them forever, it seems like. And it was initiated in 1982, I believe, is when they first started it. But when they first tried to put CWD restrictions on, I can't remember, I think it was in the 90s, we got the legislature involved. And it was kind of cool because that's the first time I ever did anything political. But we got our state representative to go down there and bring it to the floor that taxidermists are being affected by this. And not only taxidermists, but the meat cutters too. And you don't realize how many people are right on the border of Minnesota doing taxidermy and cutting meat, that all of a sudden half their business comes from out of state. Well, all of a sudden that business is gone. So back in the 90s, we got it changed where instead of just blanket covering everything, the restrictions were if you shot an elk or a deer in Colorado, let's just say, in a specific county that had CWD, then it was not allowed to come back in the state, which is fine. But then it was left everything opened up, and they opened the borders up. And now they shut it down again. And then again, it was probably brought to the floor because it was affecting people, and now it's changed again. And when we get another, group in the offices down there, they might change it again in the future. So it fluctuates.
Mm-hmm. I know. Speaking with a couple people associated with the DNR, and they said it finally hit them how much it was impacting, the
Yep.
taxidermists and the meat market and all that good stuff. But it's nice to see that's opened back up, for you guys, and you're able to take those in, because I know even myself, I do some out-of-state hunting, and, instead of me, cutting up the cape and making a mess out of it, I just brought it to the local, taxidermist and left it there and went that route. Otherwise, I would have probably been bringing it back this direction. So
there was one guy he was in Canada when that first deal went through in the 90s, and he literally had to cape his deer out. Customs wouldn't let him cross the border, so he caped his deer out in the at 2:00 in the morning in a car wash. Needless to say, the cape was just a disaster. It was shot. And there was another, back then again, there was a guy in Wisconsin that he shot his deer in North Dakota. He had to literally to abide by the law. He had to drive all the way through Iowa to get back home because he couldn't cross Minnesota.
Sure.
So
speaking of that, like what is the process if you want somebody to preserve their cape and stuff so that you guys have the best opportunity to do the best work possible?
Bring it in and have them.
So they harvest the animal. Like what process is then?
You bring it into the taxidermist, so we'll take the cape off for you if you don't know how to do that. And I've seen back in the day, again in the 90s before YouTube and all these other social media things hit the platform, I was probably replacing 15 to 20% of the deer capes because people were shooting them in the neck, cutting the throats, hanging them with a rope, doing all the wrong things. And after these, all of a sudden YouTube hits, and you can go to YouTube and you can find all this online right now on how to do it correctly. And last year, I took in 100 and some deer mounts, and I think I replaced one cape.
Oh, wow.
And it was really, and I know it's all directly associated with social media.
Yeah.
If you're questioning it, if you don't know if you're going to be able to do it or not, take it to the taxidermist on the carcass, and they can do it in the parking lot. It takes 10 minutes.
How about as far as like when you're coming from out of state and you got a long ways to go, like what temperature, I know like there's a difference between maybe there isn't, keeping it on ice versus cold water, those types of things.
Water's a no-no. You don't want to put anything on water other than fish. It's water. Water will create bacteria. Bacteria causes hair slips, so you want to keep them as dry as possible, as cool as possible, and as dry as possible.
Sure.
A lot of guys, if you're out west, and antelope hunting is notorious for having bad capes because they're shot when it's 90 degrees. Get them caped off, or take the cape off, leave the head in the cape, but get it to a locker plant, get it frozen, sharp frozen, and might take a day or two to freeze up. But then in your travel, he's still going to be cold by the time you get him back home.
So you're mentioning capes too and whatnot. So there isn't much need for extra capes out there anymore, or is there still a need for it?
With the classes, I need, I want to get this out there as much as I can. I buy capes every year. I'm paying $50 a cape. So it pays for your license and a case of beer. I need about 70 capes a year. They should be off all bucks, and they should be in that 2.5-year-old range or bigger. So 160, 170-pound deer. That's what I'm looking for, and I need all the capes I can get. So
you're looking for them to drop it off? Can you go get them, or how's that work?
Get them if they make it worth my while. If they got 5, a bunch of them, I can go pick them up. If they want to drop them off, they can drop them off here. But yeah, it's a demand, and it's another thing that you can make some money on. So
sure. How about fish? Do you take fish in for the students to work on?
Fish, I got fish suppliers. I buy them from a guy in Minneapolis. It's a fish guys is what it's called, and they buy them from I think the Indians up in Canada. So it's because it's illegal to buy fish or birds unless unless I have a fish buying license, which I don't. But I'm able to buy them through the fish guys. Of course, we got to keep all the receipts and all that on that.
Sure.
And then birds too. It's you got to get ducks. You got to get from breeders, pen raised ducks in order to purchase them for the classes.
So is there after these students take this class, they end up getting is there a license then to get through the state, or how does that work?
We talk about that the first night. It's through licensing. In order to do ducks, you have to have a federal license, and in order to get the federal license, you have to send them your Minnesota license. You got to get that first. But we talk you through how to get that as well. And it's basically just send the state $100 and they'll send you a license good for, I think it's 5 years now.
Okay. So a person's going to sign up for this class. What are they going to need for it? What are they going to have to bring?
We
all that good
supply
stuff.
Everything.
Okay.
You don't need pen and paper to take notes if you're a note taker. Other than that, we supply all the specimens, we supply all the forms, all the tools. Of course, tools stay in class. We sell kits that if you want to start your business up, we supply all the tools or 90% of the tools that you're going to need in your shop. We have kits for sale. If you have your own specimens, you can bring them. We go through them the first night to make sure they're workable. A lot of guys bring in their own antlers to do shoulder mounts on. Makes it a little more personal.
So what's the cost to take this class?
Right now it's $7,500, and then we're going to probably be having a price increase for the 2027 classes. We're probably going to go to $8,500 on that.
Okay. And then you offer multiple different classes. I mean, like, how many different times a year do you start a class?
What we do is we call it full course, runs 3 times a year, winter, spring, and summer. We don't do one in the fall, obviously, because the shop's too busy. We do also species-specific class, where if, say, you don't want to do the whole class, and you just want to do deer heads or birds or fish, we break it down and do those as well. So that's kind of like to have a lot of people taking those.
Sure.
Because they don't want to invest the whole $7,500 when they only want to do deer heads. So.
What's one thing you would say when it comes to taxidermy? Like, when a student leaves here, you want them understanding this or knowing this, if it's one thing in particular?
From the class, what we push is Minnesota Taxidermy Guild. That's your next level of education. And that is, like I mentioned it before, it's a group that got together in '82, and it's been prior to '82. If you walked into a taxidermy shop and wanted any information, you're going to get booted out of the shop. They weren't going to give you any information. It was like all these things were secrets. Well, once all the states got associations and guilds and whatnot, all taxidermists helped each other. Quality started going up, and then we were able to move the prices up. So we tell all these students, join the guilds, keep active in that, and that's usually your next best level.
Yeah. I know, what would you say, too? Like, I know I toyed around with the idea at one point, maybe getting into taxidermy. What would you say to someone who's thinking about maybe doing it, but not quite sure yet if they really want to, go for it?
Well, we like students to come in with very little knowledge or ability. If they start getting into something, and then we try and have to train them or teach them another method. They've got one method, and it's kind of like oil and water. It's trying to break somebody their habits to do it the way we teach them. There's many ways to skin a cat. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you're just sitting on the fence, not knowing about it, look at your family, look at yourself, how many mounts you're going to put on the wall. I've walked in a guy's houses. There was one client that I had through one of the high fence hunts areas. I did 20 deer a year for him for 4 years. So he had 80 deer on his wall, and he was going to that before I was hired by that place. He was there for at least 3 years prior to that, again, shooting 20 deer a year. And so that was, 120 deer that he had on the wall. And yeah, he could have paid for taxidermy class 1,000 times over again.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned you do have males and females that have taken the class.
Yep, right now it's not quite 50%, but back in the day, this was kind of a male-dominated industry, and a lot of females a lot of women are taking this class right now. And right now it's about, I'd say, 60-40, 40% female and 60% males.
I'd have to assume, just looking at your work in here, and I've seen a lot of your work in the past, in order to be a good taxidermist, you need to be a perfectionist.
Yep.
And I mean, you got to pay attention to that detail, because that's what people look for in their work.
You got to break it down. Once you learn the basics, then you start breaking it down into inches instead of looking at the overall picture. And if you break it down into square inches on the animal, and then taking care of each square inch, then the piece really starts to come together. And after you do so many of them, it's just like second nature. You can do when you sleep, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I think about that too when it comes to hunting in general. When you're hunting a property, maybe let's just say it's 80 acres or even 40 acres or 20. Instead of trying to look at that big picture, you break things down into small increments, and you're going to be a lot more efficient that way, rather than just looking at the big picture the whole time.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a great point here before we kind of started. We'll come back to you at the end here, but why don't you maybe go grab one of your students to come over here if they're willing?
Yeah, I think I can talk them into it.
And we'll have a little chat with them and see how things are going.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. How we doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'd shake your hands, but
I got hand. Yeah, sorry. I'm in the middle of something.
Right, exactly. So what's your name now?
My name's Katarina.
Katarina, and where are you from?
I'm from Detroit Lakes, Minnesota.
Okay, so you made the trip all the way down here this morning already?
Yes, I did.
Nice. What I don't know, what do you do for a living?
I currently work in retail.
Okay. So out of Detroit Lakes, you said?
Yep.
Retail. All right. Outdoors, hunting, fishing.
Outdoors.
What do you all do?
Oh, I do almost everything. Big into fishing. I do a lot of hunting. I'm really into shed hunting. I got dogs. I am not into ducks yet, but I really want to get into that type of hunting.
How'd you get into hunting and fishing?
Family. Grew up on a farm. Grew up with these massive bucks coming to our silage pile. They've been around me all my life, and it's just a wonderful thing to have. It's
that time of year. You mentioned it, shed hunting.
Yep.
As I'm driving, I'm looking for sheds out in the ditch in the field and everywhere else. Oh, that's cool. No, I think it's awesome that you're doing this right now, taxidermy. What led you to this point here, being here today?
I've been interested in taxidermy since the moment my dad said I couldn't touch his buck on the wall. He's like, "Don't touch that." I'm like, "Why?"
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to do it my whole life. So now I'm just pulled the trigger, and now I'm here, and it's one of the best decisions ever.
How'd you find out about it?
I did some research, and really, there's not that many schools out there for this type of thing. So, and I went through the reviews, and I found this one online, and it looked good, and I signed up.
Nice. How many weeks have you been coming here for the class?
It's about 2 months long.
2 months long?
Yep.
Okay. What's the biggest challenge you faced so far?
Birds.
Yeah.
Birds were my challenge. Yeah.
What is it about the birds?
It's the wires for me, getting the wires in the wings and not stabbing myself.
Sure.
I had a couple mishaps, but it turned out great.
Nice. What's been the easiest?
Ooh, I think deer. Deer turned out to be really easy for me. It just worked out. But, I brought my dad's, one of his sets in, and it's really important when you get to bring your own in and work on it, and it turns out.
It's a lot of attention to detail.
Yes.
I would assume.
Yes. But our teacher's fantastic at that, and he's amazing at showing you what you're missing. He never gets mad at you. He'll just, he keeps it really chill the whole time. Even if you're like super frustrated, he'll bring you back. He'll bring you right back to where you need to be.
What's your biggest concern moving forward? Like that kind of, maybe doesn't scare you, but it's like, oh boy, if I have to do something like that, is it the ducks? Is it maybe some exotic animal down the road? Is it just the unknown of something? Or are you starting to get pretty comfortable with things?
I'm so excited. I'm the type of person who will get something in and I will try. And if it fails, I'll keep going and going. I think my worst fear is that I don't have anybody bringing things to me. That's it.
I know, like John was just mentioning, he was just talking about people when they go out. There's a decent amount of people out there that want to, take their trophy and put it up on the wall in some way, shape, or form. He kind of mentioned just, promoting yourself in a good way. But I think, especially up in that neck of the woods, I know there's a lot of good animals up there. And,
yes.
You do good work and whatnot. I think good things will come, no doubt. But I don't know, it's cool to see a mixture of males and females. Like John was saying, back in the day, it was kind of dominated by males.
Yep.
But to be honest with you, it's there are a lot of males out there that are very attention to detail. But in my mind, I think there's a lot more females in my mind. And in order to do good work, you got to do
you gotta care about the details. You gotta care about the details that people are going to look at for sure. Yeah.
No doubt. So what's your plan after you finish the class here? What's your plan moving forward?
Full throttle. I'm going to get as many things I can get in. I'm going to get practice. I'm going to get my business set up, and I'm going to take off. That's what I want to do.
Nice. Yep. Do you have a name picked out yet?
Right now, the working name is it's going to be simple. It's Cat's Taxidermy Den. It's going to be based off kind of a pride thing. That's what I'm working on right now. So, yep.
Awesome.
Easy to remember. That's what I'm trying to think of. Something that people can, catch on and remember it.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Well, I don't know. I guess, is there something that you would like to give to the listeners out there if they're kind of teeter-tottering on, should they sign up for this class, shouldn't they? And what would you say to recommend them to, or advocate for taking the class here?
I would 100%. If you're even 25% thinking about it, take this class, especially if you get Jim as a teacher. My mom was a teacher for 40 years, and she's that teacher that inspires 500 to 1,000 kids that she taught. And Jim teaches just like my mom. He is a phenomenal teacher. It is amazing. And even if you want to do it as just a hobby, it's worth it. It's worth every penny.
No doubt. I mean, you could still keep your full-time job, and like you said,
Yep,
do it as a hobby on the
works,
side.
It works really well with and if you want it, do it in the winter times. They have different courses. They have species specific. So if you want to just do deer, you can just do the deer. You don't have to do the whole thing.
Sure.
Yep.
That's cool.
And John even has kits right away in the beginning. So if you're really scared or you just want to get going, you can buy one of his kits and then boom, you're going.
Perfect. Well, I'll tell you what, thanks for joining me.
Yeah,
that's very good information. I'll give you Nux. How about that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Everyone else scared to come talk?
Yep.
I'll tell you what, she did an awesome job coming in here, and just, it's like you said, it's cool seeing a mixture of males and females now, in the industry. It's good to see that.
And like you said, women are more detail oriented, and they're easier to teach. No, I get it. I've had, like my dad always used to say, he was in construction, and every once in a while he'd come home from the job. And he goes, "How was?" Mom would ask him how things went, and he said, "A guy on a job would have two left hands." I'm like, so I get it.
Yeah, no doubt. Whenever it comes to fine detailed stuff, like even at my house, my wife, when we make the bed, there's not a wrinkle in it where I'm like, it's staying the way it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'll be back in it later tonight.
Yeah.
But, well, why don't you just throw out the information that people need to sign up for the class here, and just so we get that out to everybody.
Yep. We're located in Rice, Minnesota, Central Minnesota. Name of the school is Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy. We have a website. We've got a Facebook page. If you want to contact me by phone, which is the best, obviously, is 320-393-2825. Texting is usually best, but you can call me. Phone's always on me, so just get a hold of me if you want me.
Now, I know Kat, right? Katarina. Yep. She's coming in here from Detroit Lakes.
Yep.
What's the furthest that people have driven?
It seems to be about 2 hours people to drive comfortably, because it's only a couple of days a week, so you're not extended. We do have the America Inn in Sartell as a place to go to. They got a good bar restaurant in the parking lot, so right across from G. Allen, so you can go down there. That's who we use for our motel, if anybody's interested in that. I did have one guy years ago. He drove all the way from Silver Bay, and that was every night. He put on like major, and he had big tires on his truck, and it was he spent more on gas than he had tuition.
Sure. Yeah, I know we have a lot of listeners down in the cities, and so it would not be out of the question for those guys and gals to swing on up this way.
Yep, hour and a half away.
Facebook page, websites, anything like that?
We got a Facebook page, Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy. If you type up taxidermy schools, we're the only one in the state, and I think there's only 2 or 3 others in the Midwest. So it's pretty easy to find.
Yeah, I know. Even this morning, I just Googled taxidermy rice, and your information came up.
Yeah,
so
longer you stay in business, the easier it is to find.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Anything else you want to add before we kind of shut things down here?
Nope. Everything just said. Get to the website or the Facebook page, and got any questions, email me through either one of those sites, or give me a shout on the phone.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate it, John.
Hey.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for listening, everybody. Appreciate it. And there you have it. Special thanks to John for coming on the podcast with me and kind of explaining everything about Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy. It's pretty sweet. Also, Katarina for hopping in there, spur of the moment, doing a little interview with me. That was pretty cool as well. If you want to know more information about the school, Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy, John will be up in Fargo at the Fargo Sportsman Show, and then also the Deer and Turkey Classic here in Minnesota. Now, I think one of the coolest things, when I was leaving, I could smell something really good as I was cleaning up all of my podcast gear, and John came out. I think it was with a bunch of venison that he made for his students. He also feeds the students there at Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy, so I thought that was pretty cool as well. But yeah, special thanks for everyone joining me here. And then along with that, I want to make sure that I thank all of our sponsors and partners that we have: Arctic Shield, Domain Outdoor, J&R Outdoors, Skullcraft, The Fish Guide, Tacticam, and also Fourth Arrow Camera Arms. And lastly, I will post a link to where you can find more information about Central Minnesota School of Taxidermy, and then along with that, our new Minnesota Rack Star store that we have open right now. So we appreciate all the support that you guys give us. Thanks for jumping back on the podcast with us, and have a great day.